burned out and buried by obligation. Clara Mendez takes a last-chance house-sitting job at Red Cedar Farm. But when the owner returns early, solitude turns to something far more complicated. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Since Clara Mendez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished folding the last load of laundry. Her tiny apartment in the city felt like it was closing in on her. 3 calls from her sister, 2 from her father, and 5 from her boss had made the day feel endless. Everyone needed something from her. As usual, just breathe, she told herself, collapsing onto her worn couch. At 28, Clara felt twice her age. Dark circles had become permanent fixtures under her brown eyes, and her once vibrant smile now took effort to maintain. Her phone rang again. It was her younger sister, Lucia. Clara, I need $50 for my textbooks, Lucia said without even saying hello. I just sent you money last week, Clara replied, rubbing her temples. I know, but Dad used it to pay his phone bill. Clara sighed, I'll transfer it tonight. After hanging up, Clara opened her laptop and stared at her bank account. The numbers were getting smaller every month. Between helping her family and working 2 jobs that barely paid the bills, she was drowning in. Email notification popped up on her screen. It was from a house-sitting agency she'd signed up with months ago but had forgotten about. Urgent 2-week assignment at Red Cedar Farm starts tomorrow. Good pay. Clara clicked on it immediately. The details seemed almost too good to be true. A farmhouse in the countryside, 2 weeks of solitude, and enough money to cover next month's rent. All she had to do was water some plants and look after a few farm animals. She called the agency right away. Yes, the owner had to leave suddenly for a business trip, the agent explained. He needs someone reliable. Can you start tomorrow? Yes, Clara said without hesitation. I can be there by noon. She called her boss at the diner and used her vacation days. Then she called the office where she worked as a night cleaner and told them she'd be gone for 2 weeks. Both seemed annoyed, but for once, Clara didn't care. That night, as she packed her small suitcase, Clara felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Just 2 weeks away from everyone who needed her. 2 weeks to breathe. Don't get too excited, she warned herself. It's just a job. But as she drove out of the city the next morning, the weight on her shoulders already felt lighter. Red Cedar Farm was more beautiful than the pictures. Rolling hills stretched as far as I could see, and the farmhouse itself was a charming 2-story building with a wide porch and rocking chairs. Clara parked her old car and took a deep breath of fresh country air. The key was under the mat, just as the agency had said. Inside the house was warm and inviting, with wooden floors and comfortable furniture. Clara walked through each room, running her hands over smooth countertops and soft throw blankets. This is where I'll be staying, she whispered in disbelief. A note on the kitchen table caught her eye. Welcome to Red Cedar Farm. Make yourself at home. Feed instructions for the animals are on the fridge. Water the greenhouse daily. Help yourself to anything in the pantry or garden. Will Carson **. Clara read the note twice, then looked at the well-stocked refrigerator. When was the last time someone had told her to help herself to anything? She spent the afternoon exploring the property. The barn housed 2 horses and a few calves. The chicken coop had 6 hens that clucked happily when she approached. A vegetable garden and greenhouse stood behind the house, bursting with fresh produce. That evening, Clara made herself a real dinner with vegetables from the garden. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. No one called her name. No one needed anything. She washed her plate, then sat on the porch with a cup of tea and watched the sunset. For the first time in years, Clara felt the knot in her chest loosen. Days passed in peaceful routine. Clara woke with the sun, fed the animals, watered the plants, and spent her afternoons reading books from Will's extensive library. She found herself smiling more, sleeping better. On the 5th day, she was in the greenhouse when she heard a truck pull up outside. Confused, she walked back to the house. No one was supposed to visit. A tall man with suntanned skin and gentle eyes was unloading bags from a pickup truck. When he saw Clara, he seemed just as surprised as she was. Hi there, he said, his voice warm and deep. Hello, Clara replied, suddenly conscious of her dirty jeans and messy ponytail. Are you looking for Will Carson? The man's smile was slow and easy. I am Will Carson. Clara's heart sank. But you're supposed to be away for 2 weeks. The agency said. My business trip got cut short, he explained, running a hand through his brown hair. I didn't have a chance to call the agency. I should go then, Clara said, already thinking about packing her things. Back to the city. Back to everyone's needs. Asterisk asterisk why? Will asked, genuinely puzzled. The house is big enough for both of us, and you were hired for 2 weeks. Asterisk asterisk Clara hesitated. I don't want to impose. Asterisk asterisk Will looked at her with those observant eyes that seemed to see right through her. You're not imposing. In fact, it would be nice to have some company. Asterisk asterisk before she could protest further, he handed her one of his bags. Help me unload, then I'll make us dinner. I bet you've been eating sandwiches all week. Asterisk asterisk actually, I've been cooking with your vegetables, Clara admitted. I hope that's okay. Asterisk asterisk Will's face lit up. More than okay. I'm glad someone's enjoying them. Asterisk asterisk that evening, Will insisted on cooking while Clara sat at the kitchen island watching him. He moved with easy confidence, telling her stories about growing up on the farm, about his travels, about coming back home after his father died last year. Asterisk asterisk so now it's just me in the land, he said, sliding a plate of pasta in front of her, but I love it here. Asterisk asterisk Clara took a bite and closed her eyes in appreciation. This is amazing. Asterisk asterisk family recipe, Will said with a smile. So, what's your story, Clara Mendez? What brings you to house sitting? Asterisk asterisk Clara hesitated, unused to talking about herself, but something about Will's gentle attention made her open up. She told him about raising her siblings after their mother left us, about supporting her father, about always being the one everyone leaned on. Asterisk asterisk I just needed a break, she admitted. Just a few days to catch my breath. Asterisk asterisk Will nodded, really listening. And have you caught your breath? Asterisk asterisk Clara smiled. I was starting to. Asterisk asterisk then don't stop on my account, Will said. Pretend I'm not even here. Asterisk asterisk but over the next few days, Clara found it impossible to ignore Will's presence. He was quiet but kind, giving her space but also appearing just when she needed company. He showed her how to properly groom the horses, taught her which vegetables were ready to harvest, and fixed the leaky faucet in her bathroom without her having to mention it. Asterisk asterisk one morning, Clara woke to find fresh coffee already made and breakfast waiting on the counter. A note read, "Gone to town for supplies. Back by noon. Enjoy your morning." Asterisk asterisk Clara sat on the porch with her coffee, watching the sun rise over the fields. She couldn't remember the last time someone had made her breakfast. Usually, she was the one cooking for everyone else, her own food getting cold while she served. Others, when Will returned, he found her in the garden picking tomatoes. "You've got quite the green thumb," he observed, helping her fill the basket. Asterisk asterisk my grandmother taught me, Clara said. She had a little garden behind our apartment building when I was young. Asterisk asterisk Will's hands were strong and calloused but gentle with the delicate plants. You miss her. Asterisk asterisk every day, Clara admitted. She was the only one who ever told me to take care of myself first. Asterisk asterisk smart woman, Will said, his eyes meeting hers. Seems like you've spent a lot of time taking care of everyone else. Asterisk asterisk Clara looked away, uncomfortable with his perception. It's what I do. Asterisk asterisk but who takes care of you, Clara? Asterisk asterisk the question hung in the air between them, and Clara had no answer. Asterisk asterisk that afternoon, one of the calves got its leg caught in some fencing. Clara heard it crying and ran to help before Will could even get there. She was on her knees in the mud, carefully freeing the frightened animal when Will arrived with the first aid kit. Asterisk asterisk let me handle this, he said, kneeling beside her. Asterisk asterisk it's Finif. Got it, Clara replied automatically, reaching for the bandages. Asterisk asterisk Will didn't move. Instead, he watched her with that mixture of awe and sadness that made Clara's chest tighten. Then he gently took the bandage from her hands. Asterisk asterisk you take care of everything and everyone ... But no one takes care of you, he said softly but firmly. Now I will. Asterisk asterisk Clara stared at him, stunned. She opened her mouth to protest, to laugh it off, to say she was fine on her own just as she always did, but the words wouldn't come. Asterisk asterisk Will carefully bandaged the calf's leg while Clara watched, speechless. When he finished, he helped her to her feet and brushed the mud from her jeans. Asterisk asterisk let's get you cleaned up, he said. I'll make dinner tonight. Asterisk asterisk you don't have to, Clara started. Asterisk asterisk Will placed a finger gently over her lips. I want to, let me. That evening, as they ate dinner on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, Clara felt something shift inside her. Something hard and protective was starting to crack. Will didn't push her to talk. He just sat beside her, solid and patient, as if he had all the time in the world. For her, I don't know how to let people help me, Clara finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. Will turned to her, his eyes reflecting the golden light of the setting sun. Then let me teach you. Later that night, Clara lay awake in her bed, replaying Will's words in her mind. For years, she had defined herself by what she gave to others, by how much she could carry without breaking, by how little she needed in return. But here was this man, this quiet, observant farmer who saw through all her carefully constructed walls, who offered to carry her burdens without asking for anything in return. It terrified her. And yet for the first time in as long as she could remember, Clara felt a flicker of something that felt dangerously like hope. Outside her window, crickets sang in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance an owl called. Clara closed her eyes and allowed herself to wonder what it would be like to stay, to be cared for, to rest. Just for these 2 weeks, she whispered to herself. Just until I have to go back. But deep down, Clara knew that something fundamental that had already changed, and going back to her old life would never be as simple as she'd planned. The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of fresh coffee and bacon. She found Will in the kitchen, flipping pancakes and humming a country song. The table was already set with orange juice, sliced fruit, and a small vase with wildflowers from the garden. "Good morning," he said, smiling when he saw her. "Sleep well." Clara nodded, still not used to someone asking about her comfort. "You didn't have to do all this." "I wanted to," Will said, placing a stack of pancakes in front of her. "Eat before they get cold." Clara took a bite and couldn't help but close her eyes in appreciation. "These are amazing. My mom's recipe," Will said, sitting across from her with his own plate. "She always said a good breakfast makes any day better." As they ate, Will told her about his plans for the day, checking the fence line, repairing the barn door, picking up some supplies in town. When he finished, he looked at her expectantly. "What about you? Any plans?" Clara hesitated. She was used to having her days dictated by other people's needs. The freedom to choose felt strange. "I thought I might read for a while," she said tentatively. "Maybe take a walk later." Will nodded, as if her simple desire to rest was the most reasonable thing in the world. The creek path is beautiful this time of year. Lots of wildflowers. After breakfast, Clara insisted on washing the dishes, and Will didn't argue. But when she finished, she found that he had already made her bed and left a fresh towel folded. On top, these small acts of kindness continued throughout the day. Will fixed the squeaky floorboard outside her room without her having to mention it. He brought her a glass of lemonade while she was reading on the porch. When her phone rang with her sister's name on the screen, he tactfully disappeared too. "Give her privacy." Clara declined the call, something she had never done before. Instead, she texted Lucia, "Can't talk now. Everything okay?" The reply came quickly. "Dad needs money for the car payment." Clara sighed, feeling the familiar weight settling back on her shoulders. "How much?" She texted back. $300. "Can you send it today?" Clara looked at her bank account. The house-sitting job would cover it, but it would take almost everything she'd earned so far. She was about to agree when she saw Will watching her from across the yard, concern evident in his eyes. For the first time, she hesitated. "I'll send what I can later this week." She typed. She put her phone down, feeling guilty yet somehow lighter. That evening, Will built a fire in the backyard pit and brought out blankets and marshmallows. The night was cool, the stars brilliantly clear away from the city lights. "My dad and I used to do this every Friday night," Will said, carefully roasting a marshmallow to golden perfection before handing it to Clara. He told the best stories. Like what Clara asked, savoring the sweet treat. Will smiled, remembering tall tales mostly. About the stars, the animals, the land. He said, "This farm has been in our family for 4 generations, and every Carson who lived here left their spirit in the soil." "Do you believe that?" Clara asked softly. Will poked at the fire, sending sparks flying upward toward the stars. "I like to think he's still here, watching over the place." He looked at her across. "The flames, what about your family? Are you close with them?" Clara stared into the fire. "They depend on me," she said, which wasn't really an answer. Will noticed. "That's not what I asked." Clara sighed. "My mother left when I was 16. My dad fell apart, so I took care of my younger siblings. I've been taking care of them ever since." "That's a lot for a 16-year-old to handle," Will said gently. Clara shrugged. "Someone had to do it." "But it didn't have to be only you," Will pointed out. "What about what you wanted?" The question caught Clara off guard. No one had ever asked her that before. "I wanted them to be okay," she said finally. Will leaned forward, his eyes serious in the firelight. "And what about now? What do you want?" "Now, Clara." Clara felt tears threatening to spill. She blinked them back. "I don't know," she whispered. "I've never had the luxury of thinking about it." Will reached across and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused against her skin. "Maybe it's time you started," he said. That night, Clara dreamed of running through open fields, weightless, and laughing. She woke with tears on her cheeks but couldn't remember why. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. Will would wake early to make breakfast. Then they would work together around the farm. He taught her how to repair fences, how to tell when the vegetables were perfectly ripe, how to speak softly to the horses so they wouldn't startle. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Clara began to change. She let her phone go to voicemail more. Often she took long walks by herself without feeling guilty. She sat on the porch swing and watched the sunset without thinking about what she should be doing instead. One afternoon, while they were picking apples in the small orchard behind the house, Clara's phone rang again. It was her boss from the diner. "We need you to come back early," he said without preamble. Jenna quit, and we're short-staffed. Before Clara could automatically agree, Will climbed down from his ladder and gave her a look that said, "Remember what we talked about?" He didn't speak, just raised his eyebrows slightly. Clara took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, but I can't. I'll be back as scheduled next week." There was silence on the other end. "Then fine, but don't expect any more time off this year." Clara hung up, her heart pounding. She had never said no to her boss before. Will smiled at her. "Proud of you," he said simply, and went back to picking apples. That evening, as they sat on the porch after dinner, a comfortable silence between them, Clara finally asked the question that had been on her mind. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Will looked at her, his eyes serious. "All what? Taking care of me, being so kind. You barely know me." Will was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "I recognize something in you," he said finally. "Something I've felt myself." "What's that?" Clara asked. "The exhaustion that comes from giving pieces of yourself away until there's almost nothing left." He turned to face her fully. "I was engaged once to a woman named Emily. She was always busy, always needed something from me. I gave and gave, thinking that's what love was. Until one day she told me I wasn't enough for her, that my quiet life here wasn't exciting enough." Clara felt a pang in her chest. "I'm sorry." Will shook his head. "Don't be. It taught me something important. There's a difference between loving someone and emptying yourself for them." He took her hand. "You've been emptying yourself for too long, Clara." Clara felt tears forming again. This time, she didn't fight them. "I don't know how to stop." Will gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "You start by letting someone else fill you back up." Later that night, as a storm rolled in across the fields, Clara found herself unable to sleep. The thunder boomed, and lightning illuminated her room in flashes of stark white light. She had always hated storms. A soft knock came at her door. Will stood there, concern etched on his face. "Thought you might be awake," he said. "Storms can be pretty intense out here." Clara nodded, hugging herself. "I've never liked them." "I made some hot chocolate," Will said. "Want to come downstairs? I find the storm is less scary when you're watching it from a safe place." In the living room, Will had built a fire and arranged blankets on the couch. He handed Clara a mug of hot chocolate topped with whipped cream and sat beside her. Not too close, but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "My sister is terrified of storms," he said conversationally, as if they weren't sitting together in the middle of the night. "When we were kids, I used to tell her stories to distract her." "Tell me one," Clara said, sipping her chocolate. Will smiled and began a story about a lonely star that fell to earth and became a firefly. His voice was low and soothing, wrapping around Clara like another blanket. She found herself leaning against him, her eyes growing heavy. The next thing she knew, sunlight was streaming through the windows. She was still on the couch, but now she was lying down, covered with a blanket, her head on a pillow. Will was nowhere to be seen, but she could smell coffee brewing in the kitchen. Clara sat up, running a hand through her hair. She had slept deeply, without dreams, for the first time in years. She found Will in the kitchen, reading the newspaper. He looked up and smiled when she entered. "Morning, sleepyhead. Coffee's fresh." "Thank you for last night," Clara said, pouring herself a cup. "I don't usually sleep well during storms." "You needed the rest," Will said simply. Then, changing the subject, "I thought we might drive into town today. There's a farmer's market I think you'd enjoy." The small town near Red Cedar Farm was picture perfect, with a main street lined with shops and a town square where the farmer's market was held. Will knew everyone, introducing Clara to farmers, shopkeepers, and neighbors with easy familiarity. "Will, Carson, is that a smile I see?" teased an older woman selling homemade jams. "It's been too long since you brought a pretty girl to town." Will laughed, not embarrassed at all. "Mrs. Peterson, this is Clara. She's house-sitting for me, or was, until I came home early." "Lucky timing," Mrs. Peterson said with a knowing wink at Clara. As they walked through the market, Will's hand occasionally brushed against Clara's. Each time, she felt a small jolt of awareness. When they stopped at a flower stall, Will bought her a small bouquet of wildflowers to replace the ones in your room, he explained. They were looking a little sad. Clara hadn't even noticed, but Will had. That night, after a dinner they cooked together, they sat on the porch swing again. The air was thick with unspoken words. Clara knew their time together was running out. In just 3 days, she was supposed to return to the city, to her jobs, to her family's needs. "Will," she began, not sure what she wanted to say. "I know," he said, as if he could read her thoughts. "You're leaving soon." Clara nodded, a lump forming in her throat. "What if you didn't go?" Will asked quietly. Clara looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" "Stay," he said simply. "Not as a house sitter, just ... Stay." Clara's heart pounded. "I can't. My family will manage." Will finished for her. "They're adults, Clara. They survived before you started taking care of everything, and they'll survive now." There are jobs here," Will said. "Or you could work with me on the farm, or start that garden you've been talking about, or do nothing for a while until you figure out what you actually want." Clara felt dizzy with the possibilities. It's not that simple. It could be, Will insisted. He took her hands in his. I know we haven't known each other long, but I've never felt this way about anyone, Clara. When I see you sleeping on the porch with a book on your chest, or talking to the chickens like they understand you, or just sitting quietly watching the sunset, I feel like I've found something I didn't even know I was missing. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared, she admitted. Of what? Of wanting something for myself. Of letting myself need someone. Of not being needed anymore. Will's eyes were soft with understanding. Your worth isn't measured by what you give to others, Clara. You deserve happiness just because you exist. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he kissed her gently, his lips warm against hers. Clara felt something break open inside her, not in pain, but in release. She kissed him back, letting herself take. When they finally pulled apart, Clara rested her forehead against his. I didn't know how tired I was, she whispered, until you gave me permission to rest. Will took her hand and pressed it gently to his chest, where she could feel his heart beating. Then let me be the place where you can stop carrying everything. Clara closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a different life, one where she wasn't defined by what she gave, but by what she allowed herself to receive. That night she called her sister. It was time to have a difficult conversation. I need to talk to you about something important, Clara began, her voice steady despite her nervousness. Things are going to change when I get back. What do you mean? Lucia asked, immediately defensive. I mean, I can't keep doing everything for everyone, Clara said. I'll still help when I can, but you and Dad need to start taking care of yourselves. There was a long silence. Then, is this because of that farm guy? Are you choosing him over your family? The accusation stung, but Clara stood firm. No, I'm choosing myself. For the first time, after she hung up, Will found her crying on the porch. Without a word, he sat beside her and held her while she sobbed. It will get easier, he promised, stroking her hair. Setting boundaries always hurts at first. Clara looked up at him through her tears. How do you know exactly what to say? Will smiled. I don't. I'm just saying what I wish someone had said to me when I was learning the same lesson. As the stars came out overhead, Clara leaned against Will's solid warmth. Tomorrow would bring more difficult conversations, more boundaries to set, more decisions to make. But tonight, for the first time in her life, Clara felt the exquisite relief of putting down a burden she had carried for too long, and in its place, the tender beginning of something that felt like peace. The sun was just rising when Clara's phone rang. She had been awake for hours, sitting on the porch swing with a cup of coffee, thinking about her conversation with Lucia the night before. Her father's name flashed on the screen. Clara took a deep breath before answering. Clara, what's going on? Her father demanded without greeting. Lucia says you're abandoning us for some farmer. Clara closed her eyes, steadying herself. Good morning to you too, Dad. Don't get smart with me, he snapped. When are you coming home? The rent is due next week, and I'm short. Once, those words would have sent Clara scrambling to fix the problem. Now she felt a new resolve strengthening her spine. I'll be back when my 2 weeks are up, as planned, she said calmly. But things are going to be different, Dad. I can't keep covering your bills. What am I supposed to do? He asked, his voice rising. You know my disability check barely covers food. You could start by not spending half of it at the bar, Clara said, surprising herself with her directness. And Lucia could get a part-time job like I did when I was her age. There was stunned silence on the other end. Then, so that's how it is. 2 weeks in the country and you forget where you came from. Who raised you? The irony of his question wasn't lost on Clara. You didn't raise me, Dad. Mom left, and you checked out. I raised myself and Lucia and Miguel. And now you think you're too good for us, he accused. Clara felt tears burning her eyes but kept her voice steady. No, I just think I deserve life. She heard footsteps and looked up to see Will approaching, concern on his face. He mouthed, You okay? Clara nodded, though she wasn't sure if it was true. If that's how you feel, don't bother coming back at all, her father said bitterly before hanging up. Clara lowered the phone, her hand shaking. Will sat beside her and put an arm around her shoulders. Family? He asked, gently. Clara nodded, leaning into his strength. My dad, he's not taking the boundary setting very well. Will didn't offer empty reassurances. He just held her, letting her process her feelings. What if he's right? Clara finally asked, voicing her deepest fear. What if I am abandoning them? Will considered this seriously. Is setting healthy boundaries the same as abandonment? It feels that way, Clara admitted. They've depended on me for so long. There's a difference between helping someone and enabling them, Will said. Trust me, I learned that lesson the hard way with my brother. Clara looked up at him. You have a brother? Will nodded, his expression troubled. Sam, he struggled with gambling for years. I kept bailing him out, thinking I was helping, but I was just making it easier for him to avoid facing his problem. What happened? I finally said no. He was furious, didn't speak to me for months. But when he realized I wasn't going to rescue him anymore, he finally got help. Will smiled slightly. He's been clean for 3 years now. Works as a counselor in a treatment center in Dallas. Clara absorbed this, or sometimes the kindest thing isn't the easiest thing. Exactly, Will agreed. Your family is upset because you're changing the rules of a game they've gotten very comfortable playing, but that doesn't mean you're wrong. Clara's phone buzzed with a text from Lucia. Thanks a lot. Dad's been drinking all morning and blaming me for everything. This is your fault. Clara showed the message to Will, her stomach knotting with guilt. She's trying to pull you back in, Will observed. It's what people do when they're used to having someone take responsibility for their feelings. But what if something happens to them because I'm not there? Clara asked, the familiar worry creeping back. They're adults. Clara Will reminded her gently. They survived before you started taking care of everything, and they'll figure it out now. Clara recognized her own words from the night before, echoed back to her. She smiled despite her anxiety. Using my own arguments against me. Will grinned. If the shoe fits. He stood and offered her his hand. Come on, I want to show you something. They walked hand in hand down to the barn, where Will led her to a stall in the back. Inside was a young calf, the same one Clara had helped with the injured leg. The bandage was off now, and the calf was standing strong, nuzzling its mother. Remember how worried you were about this little one? Will asked. Clara nodded, reaching out to stroke the calf's soft head. But look at her now, Will continued. She healed because we helped her when she needed it, then gave her space to get stronger on her own. Clara understood what he was saying. You think my family will be the same way? I think they're stronger than you give them credit for, Will said, and I think you're stronger than you realize. Clara leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. When did you get so wise? Will laughed. Trust me, I'm still figuring things out too. That afternoon they rode horses to the far edge of Will's property, where a creek cut through a stand of old oak trees. The day was perfect, warm sunshine, a gentle breeze, and wildflowers dotting the fields they passed through. This is my favorite spot on the whole farm, Will said as they dismounted near the creek. He spread a blanket on the grass and unpacked the lunch they had brought: sandwiches, fruit and cookies Clara had baked that morning. As they ate, Will talked about his plans for the farm, expanding the vegetable garden, maybe adding a small orchard of fruit trees, fixing up the old guest cabin by the pond. You love this place, Clara observed, watching his face light up as he described his vision. It's home, Will said simply. Not just the land or the house, but the feeling of belonging somewhere. Clara thought about her cramped apartment in the city, with its leaky faucet and noisy neighbors. It had never felt like home, just a place she slept between helping everyone else. I've never really had that, she admitted. A place that felt like it was truly mine. Will's eyes were gentle as he looked at her. You could have it here. The words hung between them, full of promise and possibility. Clara felt her heart skip. But before she could respond, her phone rang again. It was Miguel, her younger brother, who rarely called. Clara, you need to come home, he said, his voice tight with worry. Dad's in the hospital. Clara sat up straight, alarm coursing through her. What happened? He was drinking all day after you called, Miguel explained. Fell down the stairs at his apartment, broke his arm and got a concussion. Clara's mind raced. Is he going to be okay? The doctors say yes, but he's asking for you. Lucia's freaking out. Clara looked at Will, who was watching her with concern, though he couldn't hear Miguel's side of the conversation. I'll come right away, she told Miguel. Which hospital? After hanging up, she explained the situation to Will. His face showed understanding but also caution. Do you want me to drive you to the city? He offered. Clara shook her head. I need to go alone. I need to think. Will nodded, though she could see the worry in his eyes. I understand. They rode back to the farmhouse in silence, both lost in their thoughts. As Clara packed her bag, Will leaned against the doorframe of her room. You'll come back? He asked, trying to keep his voice casual but not quite succeeding. Clara paused, clothes in hand. I don't know, she said honestly. I want to, but they're your family, Will finished for her. I get it. He crossed the room and took her hands in his. Just remember what we talked about. Helping isn't the same as sacrificing yourself. Clara nodded, fighting back tears. I'll try. Will pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. Whatever you decide, I'll be here. As Clara drove back to the city, her mind was a storm of conflicting emotions. Worry for her father warred with resentment at being pulled away from the peace she had found. Guilt about not being there was tangled with anger at being manipulated, and underneath it all was a new feeling: grief for the life she could have had if she stayed with Will. The hospital was chaotic, the emergency room packed with people. Clara found Lucia pacing in the waiting area, her face streaked with tears. Finally, Lucia exclaimed when she saw Clara. Where have you been? He's been asking for you for hours. Clara suppressed the urge to apologize. I came as soon as I heard. How is he like you care? Lucia snapped. If you hadn't upset him, this wouldn't have happened. The accusation stung, but Clara took a deep breath. Lucia, Dad is responsible for his own actions, not me. Lucia looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. What's happened to you? You're not the same since you went to that farm. You're right, Clara agreed. I'm not. Before Lucia could respond, a nurse approached. "You can see your father now." Her father looked small in the hospital bed, his arm in a cast, a bandage on his head. When he saw Clara, his expression wavered between relief and resentment. "You came," he said. Clara moved to his bedside. "Of course I came. Does this mean you're staying?" he asked. Hopeful. Clara hesitated. "I'm here now. Let's focus on getting you better." The next few days were a blur of hospital visits, insurance forms, and arguments with Lucia. Clara slept on the uncomfortable couch in her father's apartment, waking with a sore back and a heart that ached for the peace of Red Cedar Farm. She texted Will regularly, and his responses were a lifeline, supportive without being pushy, understanding without enabling her to fall back into old patterns. "Remember to take care of yourself too," he reminded her. "You can't pour from an empty cup." On the third day, when her father was released from the hospital, the real challenges began. He needed help with everything: dressing, eating, taking his medication. Lucia disappeared for hours at a time, leaving Clara to handle it all. "See," her father said as she helped him to the couch. "You're needed here. That farmer can find another girl." Clara felt a flash of anger. "His name is Will and he's not looking for another girl. He cares about me," her father scoffed. "Known him what, a week? I'm your family, Clara Blood. That means something." Clara set his medication on the table with more force than necessary. "Yes, it does. But it doesn't mean I owe you my entire life." That evening, after her father was asleep, Clara sat on the fire escape outside his apartment, looking at the city lights. They seemed harsh and cold compared to the stars over Red Cedar Farm. Her phone buzzed with a message from Will. "Thinking of you. The farm is too quiet without you." Clara felt tears come to her eyes. She wanted to be there, in the peace of that place, with the man who really saw her for the first time in her life. But how could she leave her family when they needed her? The next morning, Lucia actually showed up for breakfast, as proposed. They sat at the small kitchen table. Clara tried to broach the subject of shared responsibility. "I can't stay indefinitely," she began. "I have my own life to get back to." Lucia rolled her eyes. "You mean your farmer boyfriend?" Partly, Clara admitted. "But also my jobs, my apartment jobs. You were ready to quit," Lucia pointed out. "An apartment you were thinking of giving up. Don't pretend this is about anything but him." Clara took a deep breath. "You're right, that Will is part of it. He makes me happy. But this is also about me figuring out who I am outside of taking care of everyone else." "How convenient," Lucia said bitterly. "And who's supposed to take care of Dad while you're finding yourself?" "We could share the responsibility," Clara suggested. "You could move in temporarily, or we could hire a part-time aide with Dad's insurance." "So, I'm supposed to put my life on hold because you want to play house on a farm?" Clara felt her patience wearing thin. "I put my life on hold for years to take care of both of you. I'm not asking you to do the same. I'm asking for us to find a solution together." Lucia stood up abruptly. "There's already a solution. You're it. That's how it's always been." As she stormed out, Clara's phone rang. It was Miguel. "How's it going?" he asked. Clara sighed. "Not great. Lucier's being difficult, and Dad's using guilt to try to keep me here." "Sounds about right," Miguel said dryly. "Listen, I've been thinking, what if I moved back for a while?" Clara was surprised. Miguel had moved to Seattle 2 years ago and seemed happy there. "What about your job?" "I can work remotely," he explained. "My lease is up next month anyway. And honestly, it's about time I stepped up. You've been carrying this family long enough." Clara felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. "Are you sure? Positive?" Miguel said. "You deserve a chance at happiness, Clara. If this whole guy makes you happy, that's where you should be." After they hung up, Clara sat quietly, processing the unexpected support. For so long she had believed she was indispensable, that her family would fall apart without her constant sacrifice. But maybe, just maybe, they were all stronger than she had given them credit for. That night, her father had a fever. Clara stayed up with him, giving him medication and cooling his forehead with a damp cloth. As the night deepened, he became less combative, more reflective. "You're a good daughter, Clara," he said softly as she adjusted his pillows. "Better than I deserved." Clara was startled by the admission. "Dad, no. Let me say this," he interrupted. "I know I failed you kids when your mother left. I was so hurt, so angry. I checked out when you needed me most." Clara sat on the edge of the bed, listening. "And you stepped up," he continued. 16 years old, and you became the parent I couldn't be. I let you do it because it was easier than facing my own pain." Clara felt tears forming. "I didn't know what else to do." "I know," her father said, his eyes sad, "and I took advantage of that." "I'm sorry, Clara." The words she had waited years to hear hung in the air between them. "Lucia showed me the texts from your farmer, Will," her father continued. "He seems like a good man." Clara nodded, surprised. "He is." Her father reached for her hand with his good arm. "If he makes you happy, you should go back. We'll figure things out here." Clara squeezed his hand, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. "I want you to be happy, Clara," her father said, his voice rough with emotion. "It's past time." Next morning, Clara called Will. Just hearing his voice made her heart lighter. "How are things?" he asked, concern evident even through the phone. "Complicated," Clara admitted, "but better than I expected. Miguel's moving back to help with Dad, and we had a good talk last night. A real one, maybe for the first time." "That's great," Will said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "So what happens next?" Clara took a deep breath, gazing out the window at the city skyline. "I need to stay a few more days, just until Miguel gets here. And then, if the offer still stands." "It does," Will said immediately. "The farm is too empty without you, Clara. I'm too empty without you." Clara closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. "I miss you," she whispered. "I miss the peace." "Then come home," Will said simply. "Come home to me." Home, the word echoed in Clara's heart. For the first time, she could see a future where she wasn't defined by what she gave to others, a future where she could be herself, just Clara, and that would be enough. But as she hung up the phone, doubt crept back in. Was she making a mistake? Was she abandoning her family for a dream that might not last? What if Will, like everyone else in her life, eventually decided she wasn't enough? That evening, as she sat with her father watching an old western on TV, her phone buzzed with a text. It was a photo from Will, a sunset over Red Cedar Farm, the sky painted in brilliant oranges and pinks. The caption read, "Saving your place on the porch swing." Clara smiled, tracing the image with her finger. Then her father spoke, startling her. "You should go back," he said, nodding at her phone. "You light up when you hear from him." Clara looked at her father in surprise. "But what about you? Your arm?" "The concussion I'll heal," he said firmly. "And Miguel will be here soon. I've leaned on you for too long, Clara. It's time I learned to stand on my own 2 feet." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Are you sure?" Her father nodded, his expression serious. "I want to be someone you can be proud of, not someone who holds you back." Clara leaned over and hugged him carefully, mindful of his injuries. "I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart," he replied, his voice gruff with emotion. "Now go pack. You've got a life waiting for you." As Clara folded her clothes that night, preparing for the journey back to Red Cedar Farm, she felt a strange mixture of emotions, excitement, hope, but also fear. She had spent so long being needed by others that she wasn't sure who she was without that identity. What if Will discovered that the real Clara, not the caretaker, not the responsible one, just Clara, wasn't enough? What if the peace she had found at the farm was temporary? What if in the end, she was just trading one form of dependency for another? These questions tumbled through her mind as she zipped her suitcase closed. But underneath the doubts was a certainty she couldn't ignore. She wanted to go back. She wanted to see if what was growing between her and Will could become something lasting and true. She wanted for once in her life to choose her own happiness. As the city lights faded in her rearview mirror the next morning, Clara felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. Whatever happened next, she was driving towards something new, something that belonged to her alone. And for now, that was enough. The familiar gravel road leading to Red Cedar Farm came into view as Clara rounded the final bend. Her heart quickened at the sight of the farmhouse in the distance, its white walls gleaming in the afternoon sun. For a moment she pulled over to the side of the road, needing to catch her breath. Was she really doing this? Choosing herself, choosing Will over the life she had always known. Her phone buzzed with a text from Miguel. "Made it to Dad's. Everything's under control. Be happy, sis." Clara smiled, grateful for her brother's support. Then she put the car back in drive and continued down the road that felt more and more like the path home. As she approached the farmhouse, she saw Will on the porch, as if he had been waiting for her. The moment her car came into view, he stood, a smile spreading across his face. By the time she parked, he was already walking toward her, his steps quickening with each moment. Clara got out of the car, suddenly shy despite everything they had shared. "Hi," she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Will stopped just short of touching her, his eyes searching her face. "You came back." There was wonder in his voice, as if he hadn't quite believed it would happen. "I came home," Clara corrected softly. Will's smile was like sunrise. He stepped forward and pulled her into his arms, lifting her slightly off the ground in his enthusiasm. Clara laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck, all hesitation forgotten. When he set her down, Will kept his hands on her waist as if afraid she might disappear. "How's your dad?" "Better," Clara said. "Miguel arrived yesterday and he's going to stay for a while. Dad and we had some good talks." Will nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I'm glad." He helped her bring her bags inside, taking them to the same room she had stayed in before. But something had changed. The room felt different now, not temporary, but like a place where she belonged. "I thought we could have dinner on the porch tonight," Will said. "The weather's perfect." Clara nodded, suddenly overcome with emotion. The simple normality of it, making plans for dinner, unpacking her bags. The way Will casually touched her shoulder as he passed was overwhelming after the tension of the past week. "Hey," Will said, noticing her tears. "What's wrong?" Clara shook her head. "Nothing's wrong. It's just... I'm not used to things being this easy." Will's expression softened. He cupped her face gently. "Not everything has to be a struggle, Clara." That evening, they sat on the porch eating the meal they had prepared together. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant colors, just like the photo Will had sent her. "So," Will said, refilling her glass of lemonade, "what happens now?" Clara looked out at the field stretching before them. "I don't know," she admitted. "I gave notice at both my jobs before I left the city. My lease is up at the end of the month. I guess I'm starting over." "Any ideas about what you want to do?" Will asked. Clara hesitated. They hadn't really discussed the practicalities of her staying. "I could look for work in town, or maybe online. I have some savings to tide me over." Will set down his fork, his expression serious. "I was hoping, that is, if you want to, you could stay here with me." Clara's heart skipped here. "On the farm," Will nodded. "We could fix up the guest cabin if you want your own space." He paused, suddenly looking nervous. "Or you could stay in the main house. With me." The implication was clear. This wasn't just about a place to live or a job. This was about them, together. "Will," Clara began, "everything's happening so fast. We've only known each other a few weeks." "I know," he agreed. "And if you need time, that's okay. But Clara, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. When you were gone, it was like all the light went with you." Clara felt tears threatening again. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if this is just another situation where someone needs me, where I lose myself taking care of someone else?" Will reached across the table and took her hand. "That's a fair question. But let me ask you something. Do you feel like you have to take care of me?" Clara considered this. "No," she realized. "You're the first person who's ever really taken care of me. And that's what I want to do," Will said earnestly. "Not because you can't take care of yourself, but because you deserve to be cared for too." Clara squeezed his hand, touched by his words. "But relationships can't be one-sided. I need to give too." Will smiled. "Of course, but there's a difference between giving freely and giving until you're empty. I don't want to empty you, Clara. I want us to fill each other up." As night fell, they moved to the porch swing. Will wrapped a blanket around them both as they swayed, gently, listening to the crickets and watching the stars appear. "Tell me what you're afraid of," Will said softly. "Really afraid of?" Clara was quiet for a long moment. "That you'll get tired of me," she finally whispered. "That once I'm not useful, you won't want me anymore." Will turned to face her, his expression serious in the dim light. "Clara, I didn't fall for you because you're useful. I fell for you because of who you are, your kindness, your strength, the way you talk to the chickens like they understand you, how you always make sure everyone has enough before you take anything for yourself." Clara smiled at his observations, touched that he had noticed such small details. "I want you in my life," Will continued, "not for what you can do for me, but for who you are when you're not doing anything at all." His words unlocked something deep in Clara's heart, a hope she had almost forgotten how to feel. "I want that too," she admitted. "I want to find out who I am when I'm not taking care of everyone else." Will pulled her closer. "Then let's find out together." The days that followed settled into a rhythm that felt both new and strangely familiar. Clara helped Will with the farm chores in the mornings, learning more about the animals and the land. In the afternoons, she often found herself in the vegetable garden, expanding it beyond what Will had maintained on his own. "You've got a gift," Will observed one day as he watched her carefully transplanting tomato seedlings. "These plants respond to you." Clara smiled, pleased by the compliment. "My grandmother taught me. She always said plants know when they're loved." "Smart woman," Will said, squeezing her shoulder gently before heading back to repair the fence in the north pasture. Clara watched him go, still marveling at how icily they moved together, how naturally they had begun to share a life. They hadn't rushed anything physically, both understanding that what was growing between them needed time and care, like the seedlings in her hands. A week after her return, Clara drove into town to mail some papers terminating her apartment lease. While there, she stopped by the local bookstore she had visited with Will during their trip to the farmer's market. Mrs. Harrison, the elderly owner, recognized her immediately. "You're Will Carson's young lady. How nice to see you again." Clara smiled, still getting used to being identified that way. "Just browsing today," she explained. Mrs. Harrison nodded knowingly. "Will mentioned you might be staying around. We're all pleased as punch about it. That boy has been alone too long." As Clara wandered through the shelves, Mrs. Harrison continued chatting. "You know, I've been thinking about retiring. My arthritis makes it hard to manage all the boxes and shelving." Clara made sympathetic noises, only half listening as she examined a book on organic gardening. "What I need is someone to help run the place," Mrs. Harrison continued. "Someone who loves books and can handle the computer side of things. My grandson set up a website, but I can't make heads or tails of it." Clara looked up, suddenly paying full attention. "Are you offering me a job, Mrs. Harrison?" The older woman smiled. "Just putting it out there. Part-time to start. See if it suits you. Will mentioned you worked in an office before." Clara was touched that Will had been thinking about her future. "I'd like that," she said. "I've always loved books." "Well then," Mrs. Harrison said, extending her hand. "Shall we say Monday morning, 9 o'clock?" By the time Clara returned to the farm, the sun was setting. She found Will in the barn, brushing down one of the horses. He looked up with a smile when he heard her footsteps. "How was town?" he asked. Clara leaned against the stall door. "Interesting. I got a job offer." Will's eyebrows rose. "At the bookstore," Clara nodded. "Mrs. Harrison needs help. She mentioned you had talked to her about me." Will looked slightly embarrassed. "I may have mentioned you were looking for work in town. I hope that's okay." Clara crossed to him and rose on her tiptoes to kiss his cheek. "It's more than okay. Thank you for thinking of me." Will set down the brush and turned to face her fully. "I think of you all the time," he admitted, his voice low. Clara's heart quickened at the intensity in his eyes. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, Will lowered his head and kissed her. Unlike their first kiss on the porch, which had been gentle and questioning, this one held promise and certainty. When they broke apart, both slightly breathless, Will rested his forehead against hers. "Stay with me tonight," he whispered. "Not in the guest room." "With me?" Clara nodded, no hesitation in her heart. "Yes." Later, lying in Will's bed with his arm around her, Clara felt a peace she had never known before. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across the room. "What are you thinking?" Will murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. Clara smiled in the darkness. "That I've never felt this way before. Like I belong somewhere. Like I belong to myself." Will pulled her closer. "You do belong to yourself, and I'm just grateful you're choosing to share that self with me." The next morning, Clara woke before Will. She slipped out of bed and made her way to the kitchen to start coffee. As she waited for it to brew, she stepped out onto the porch, breathing in the fresh morning air. The farm stretched before her, bathed in the golden light of dawn. The animals were stirring, chickens clucking, horses nickering softly in the distance. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, still wearing Will's shirt from the night before. This could be her life now. This peace, this belonging. No more endless cycle of giving until she was empty. No more defining herself solely by what she could do for others. The screen door creaked, and Will appeared beside her, hair rumpled from sleep. Without a word, he handed her a cup of coffee, made just the way she liked it. "Good morning," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. Clara smiled up at him. "Good morning." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. Then Will cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he began, "about the guest cabin." Clara tensed slightly. Was he going to suggest she move in there? After all, had he already reconsidered their new closeness? "I was thinking we could fix it up as a place for your family to stay when they visit," Will continued, oblivious to her momentary worry. "Your brother Miguel, or your sister if she ever comes around. Your dad when he's better." Clara stared at him, speechless. "What?" Will asked, noticing her expression. "Did I say something wrong?" Clara shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "No, you said something exactly right." Will looked confused. Then understanding dawned. "Clara, I would never try to separate you from your family. They're part of who you are, even though they've been difficult." Clara asked. "Families are always complicated," Will said with a shrug. "That doesn't mean you stop loving them. It just means you find healthier ways to love them." Clara set down her coffee cup and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Will held her tightly. "What for understanding, for not making me choose." Will tilted her chin up to look at her. "The only person you need to choose is yourself, Clara. Everything else follows from that." 2 weeks later, Clara's phone rang early in the morning. It was Lucia, which was surprising. They had barely spoken since Clara's return to the farm. "Clara." Lucia's voice sounded small and uncertain. "What's wrong?" Clara asked immediately, old habits kicking in. "Nothing's wrong," Lucia said. I just... I wanted to apologize for how I acted when you were here." Clara sat down on the porch steps, shocked. "Lucia, no. Let me finish," her sister interrupted. "Miguel and I had a long talk. He made me see how unfair we've been to you all these years. How much you gave up for us." Clara was speechless. "I was angry because I was scared," Lucia continued. "Scared of having to be responsible for myself. Scared of losing you. But Miguel said you're not gone. You're just... living your life finally." "He's right," Clara said softly. "I'm still your sister. I still love you." "I know," Lucia replied. "And I want you to be happy." "This farm guy will," Clara corrected gently. "If Will makes you happy, then I'm glad." Clara felt tears spilling down her cheeks. "Thank you, Lucia. That means a lot to me." "So," Lucia said, her voice lighter now, "when do we get to visit this famous farm?" Clara laughed through her tears. "Whenever you want. Will's fixing up the guest cabin as we speak." After hanging up, Clara sat on the porch steps for a long time, watching the morning activity on the farm. Will was in the barn, visible through the open doors as he stacked hay, bales. The chickens scratched in the yard, and the breeze rustled through the tall grass in the fields. This was her life now. Not perfect, not without challenges, but hers. Chosen freely, lived fully. She walked to the barn, leaning against the doorway as she watched Will work. He looked up and smiled when he noticed her. "Everything okay?" he asked, wiping sweat from his brow. Clara nodded. Lucia called. She apologized. Will's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's great. She wants to visit," Clara added. Will grinned. "Better get that cabin finished then." He returned to his work, and Clara watched him for a moment longer, her heart full. Then she rolled up her sleeves and joined him, lifting a bale onto the growing stack. "You don't have to help," Will said, though he didn't stop her. "I want to," Clara replied simply. "We're partners, right?" Will's smile was warm enough to heat the whole barn, right? That evening, they sat on their porch swing, and Clara now thought of it as theirs, not just his, watching the fireflies emerge as dusk settled over the farm. "I was thinking," Will said, his arm around her shoulders, "about what you said this morning, about being partners." Clara looked up at him.
Yeah.
Will seemed uncharacteristically nervous. "I know it's only been a month since you came to house it. Maybe this is too fast, but I've never been more sure of anything in my life." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Clara's breath caught. "This was my grandmother's," Will said, opening the box to reveal a simple ring with a small diamond. Nothing fancy, but it meant the world to her. "My grandfather gave it to her right here on this farm, 70 years ago." Clara couldn't speak, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm not asking for an answer right now," Will continued. "I know we're still getting to know each other, but I wanted you to know where I stand, where I hope we're heading." He took her hand, his eyes serious in the fading light. "I love you, Clara Mendez. I love your strength, your kindness, your heart. And whenever you're ready, whether that's next month or next year, I want to spend my life with you." Clara looked at the ring, then at Will's face, so open, so honest, so full of love for her. Not for what she could do or give, but for who she was. "Ask me," she whispered. Will's eyes widened. "Now, are you sure?" Clara nodded, suddenly certain. "Ask me." Will took a deep breath, then slid off the swing to kneel before her. "Clara Mendez, will you marry me? Will you build a life with me here, as my partner, my best friend, my love?" Clara smiled through her tears. "Yes," she said, "yes to all of it." Will slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the swing and spinning her around. Clara laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck, feeling lighter than she had in years. When he set her down, she looked up at him, suddenly serious. "I have one condition." Will raised an eyebrow. "Name it." "Promise me you'll always tell me when something's broken, when you need help, when things get hard. Promise me we'll carry the weight together." Will nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I promise. No more caretaker and taking care of, just partners sharing the load." Clara rested her hand on his chest, feeling his heart beat steady and strong beneath her palm. "I used to think love meant giving until you had nothing left," she said softly. "You taught me that real love is about filling each other up instead of emptying ourselves." Will covered her hand with his own. "And I'll keep filling you up, every day, for the rest of our lives." As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Clara and Will stood together on the porch of what was now truly their home. The farm stretched around them, a testament to roots that ran deep and new growth that reached for the sky. Clara had come to Red Cedar Farm looking for a brief respite, just long enough to catch her breath. Instead, she had found herself. She had found home. She had found a love that didn't demand her sacrifice, but celebrated her strength. "What are you thinking?" Will asked, his arm around her waist. Clara smiled, leaning into his warmth. "I'm thinking that for the first time in my life, I'm not waiting for someone to need me. I'm just ... being." Will kissed at the top of her head. "And how does it feel?" Clara looked out at the land that had become her sanctuary, at the man who had become her partner, at the future stretching bright and possible before them. "It feels like peace," she said simply. "It feels like home." And in the gentle night that wrapped around Red Cedar Farm, Clara Mendez, no longer just a caretaker, but a woman fully herself, finally knew what it meant to be at rest.